do you think Zionism is racist?
So my family, the Holocaust is in our DNA. And I think the idea of Zionism initially was to make sure that there was a peaceful place for the Jewish people who were being persecuted right across Europe, and obviously most notably in Nazi Germany. In fact, my whole heritage involves pogroms in Ukraine, in Poland, and then arriving in the UK. So I think clearly when the idea of Zionism was created, that was about making sure there was a peaceful place for people to live. I think the version of Zionism that Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government put forward, I would say, is racist. It clearly involves the extermination of the Palestinian people. So I find the kind of conversation about the term less helpful, because actually lots of people define differently. I think the important thing is what can we do about that?
Let's just put this to bed. Zionism is not racist.
It depends what you mean by Zionism, and I think that's...
Well, I think most of us know what Zionism means.
I genuinely wouldn't know what you meant by Zionism, and I say that as a Jewish person. If we're talking about how Zionism...
Well, you said you agreed with it a moment ago. You said it sort of in its initial incarnation, it was a perfectly reasonable thing.
But we're going back decades and decades, and I believe where it is now is very different to its initial carnation.
But the basis of it is that Jewish people have a right to their own state.
I don't think that is the basis anymore if you're Benjamin Netanyahu. I think at this point he talks about from the river to the sea and casting out the Palestinians. It's not just talk.
Just as sort of Hamas were talking about from the river to the sea, casting out all Jews.
And both is horrific, but the difference is we're seeing the extermination of the Palestinian people on a daily basis. And so I think, again, if that's your definition of Zionism, then that is clearly racist. So again, I think it's less about the label and more what can we do as politicians against the Israeli government, which is stopping the selling of arms, stopping the sharing of intelligence.
There'll be many Jewish people listening to this now. Can you speak directly to them? Because, it seems to me that you are equivocating on whether Zionism is a racist ideology. You're effectively, if this motion went through your conference, your mother and your sister, who've been openly pro-Israel, would be cast as racist. Now, you can't possibly, as leader of the Green Party, want that to happen.
I am equivocating, actually, and I'm openly equivocating.
How can you equivocate on something like that? Because given your heritage?
Because you need to define the label, first of all, and different people define the label in different ways. And so I find it unhelpful that the whole conversation, I don't think, is particularly practical in order to get to steps. The steps I want to get to is a place where Israelis and Palestinians can live together, where there's peace in the region, and where we end the current genocide. To do that, I think we need to put pressure on the Israeli government, from the UK government, to put pressure on the Israeli government to end the arms sales, to end the sharing of intelligence, and to call to an end to the genocide. I find the conversation about labels less helpful, and actually what I would want to see is a more sensitive and nuanced conversation about what exactly it is we're talking about, because ultimately, by the end of it, I would hope that everyone wants peace.
So if your mother were to ring up now, and she hasn't, by the way, you may be relieved to hear, if she rang up now and said, Zack, I define myself as a Zionist, are you seriously saying that you would support a motion to your party conference that would label me a racist? Come on.
Well, again, we'd be back to exactly what do you mean by Zionism, and that's why I think the motion...
Well, you're dancing on the head of a pin, aren't you? And people don't like politicians who do that. You said you would be the green version of Nigel Farage. Well, with Nigel Farage, whatever his faults may be, you do generally get a straight answer to a straight question.
Well, the two-child benefit cap seems a different answer every single day, but to come back with Nigel Farage, but to come back to the point, I think, terms are abstract, and this is a very abstract term, and it depends what exactly you're talking about. If you're talking about the original historical definition, no, I don't think it's racist. If you're talking about the genocide of the Palestinian people under the definition of Zionism, then yes, it's clearly racist. I think you need to know which version you're talking about, and that's why I find the term unhelpful.
We've been talking about this now for 9 minutes. You haven't said a single thing that would convince any Jewish person listening to this programme that they should vote for you, and you were the creator of the... What was it called? Jewish Greens. Jewish Greens. You were the creator of that. You seem to have travelled on a bit of a journey over the years on this, and yet everything you've done in this conversation is to effectively say to Arabs, to Palestinians, to Muslims, yeah, I'm the man for you. Not a single word to persuade a Jew to vote for you?
Well, what I would say is the poll ratings are showing that British Jews are increasingly voting and joining for the Green Party. And I think that's because there's a whole generation.
What's the evidence for that?
There's polling out from it. I don't know exactly which polling company, but you can Google while I'm talking, or the producer can Google. They were going to the Green Party and to Reform in increasing numbers, depending on where you lie on this question. And I think that's because there's a whole generation. I know there's a whole generation of Jewish people who I meet all the time when I go to Jewish events who say to me, I'm so pleased that there's someone speaking up who is both proud of being Jewish, proud of our heritage, and saying what Benjamin Netanyahu is doing is not in our name, and it's not in the name of what it means to be Jewish. And I think it's important that we have that voice in British politics.
I shouldn't even have to ask this question, but I think given what you've said about Zionism, I do have to ask the question, do you think Israel has a right to exist as an independent state?
I genuinely don't think any state has a right to exist. People have a right to exist. So Israelis have a right to exist. Palestinians have a right to exist. But the ideas of borders and countries is a very esoteric conversation.
You see, again, you've danced on the head of a pin. You haven't given a straight answer to that question. Does Israel have a right to exist as a state or not?
I've given a very straight answer. What we're doing here is oversimplifying a complex conversation about borders and about states. And I repeat, Israelis and Palestinians...
I can quite happily say to you that I think the United Kingdom has a right to exist as a state. I think Russia has a right to exist as a state. I think Israel has a right to exist as a state. Why can't you?
Well, you say the UK has a right to exist as a state, but you should ask some of the Scottish people that or Welsh people that who want independence. And again, we get into
there's not a majority for independence.
Well, I think there will be in a few years.
Well, there may be, and then we can have that conversation.
But then they don't have a right to exist as a state. Well, no, because
Scotland has an absolute right to exist as an independent state if its people vote for such a thing.
Right. And so I'm giving you the same answer. So the Israelis and the Palestinians have a right to vote for what they think the state should be, but that's none of my business as a foreign politician.
Okay.